First, my name's Tim. I'm the youth minister here at the cathedral and have been in post for coming up to a year actually. My desk is in a big shared office with lots of other staff at the cathedral who all have very tidy desks with all piles of paper at right angles and that type of stuff. And I have finger puppets and Spider-Man toys and mountains of paper. Some of it I need and some of it is just buried on the bottom of other stuff. And it's a bit of a state, and I'm always quite embarrassed whenever anybody comes into the office. It is very difficult to define my role, but I guess, I mean, the clue's in the title. It's to minister to young people, and so young people is secondary school. So I work with kind of from year 6, which is the last end of primary school, all the way up until kind of sixth form, and even the first few years of university. And I guess my job is, I mean, there's two aspects of it. One is to represent the church to young people and to kind of represent the love of Christ and the inclusiveness and the welcoming of the church. And the other thing is also to represent the voice of young people to the church and to kind of bring in some of the elements of chaos and equally forward thinking and that type of thing that young people bring with them, and to make sure that people within the church are hearing them. One of the troubles with I think Christian youth work is that a big part of the scene has fallen to the numbers game almost, that people talk about, we've got 70 young people in our youth group or 700 young people in our youth group, and isn't it great how many young people we're reaching? And actually what I'm more interested in is we've got a relatively small youth group at the cathedral, and what I'm interested in is getting some real in-depth relationships with those young people and really getting to know them in a way that actually relates to them, and in a way that the church can communicate to them and they can communicate to the church, but in depth, so it's more about, I think, a small group of people who we go into things in depth with. And I always say to people when I'm planning stuff that I ask myself 3 questions before planning any event, 3 kind of boxes that it needs to tick, and if it doesn't tick any of the boxes, we don't do it. One is relationship building amongst the young people. Certainly when I came to the cathedral, there are lots of young people who are around, but there wasn't really a youth group, a sense of community within those young people. So a lot of the events are about bringing them together and getting them to spend time with each other and so on. The next one is building relationships between young people and the rest of the church, so adults in the church and even younger children within the church, so that when they show up to the church on a Sunday morning, they have people who are actually looking out for them, and people who can kind of come and say hello and ask how that exam was that they were worried about last week, or that type of thing. People other than the youth minister as well, I think it's important to say. And the third, and this is perhaps the obvious one as a kind of Christian youth minister, is relationships with God. So it's about engaging with the rhythm of the church and the worship in the church and that type of thing in a way which hopefully will begin to set them up for the rest of their lives. It's the beginning of a journey for them, the Christian journey. So there's those 3 boxes. They're all about relationships with each other, relationships with other people within the church, and relationships with God. And that's really how I work with the young people here. And then, I mean, as well as those, there are the young people on the outside of the church, which it feels like almost a quite different job sometimes, because a great part of that, probably 90% of that, is just being a listening ear and just being around and not having an agenda, not trying to crowbar, Jesus in, not trying to get them to believe or act in any particular way, but just being a friend in the way that I think that Jesus was to people, a pastoral presence who doesn't have an agenda, who isn't a teacher, who isn't a counselor, who isn't a parent, but is just an adult who's willing to listen to them. And I think that communicates quite strongly the love of Christ. That's what I try to do anyway. I often kind of very, very broadly divide young people into 2 kind of camps. One group of young people who I work with finds it very hard to think about the present and only thinks about the future, and I need to get these exams, I need to get into university, I need to get a good job. If I don't go there, my life's going to be horrible, and it's all about the future. And then the other side, again, very broadly speaking, is young people who are incapable of thinking about anything other than the present, so they're the young people who are struggling with school and certainly with church and that type of thing, who really live only for the present moment and have no thought about the consequences to their actions and that type of thing. And I think a big part of my job is to try to bring those 2 groups of young people together and to help them to learn from each other. Some young people just need to relax and to learn to enjoy life and to learn to make the best of being young, to realize how much of a gift it is to to be a child and to not have heavy legal responsibilities and that type of thing. And the other group need to learn to think a little bit more about the future and to think about what do they actually want to do when they're older and how are they going to take steps towards achieving that and that type of thing. 99% of my job is good fun, you know, because my job is to hang out with people and to organise fun activities that build friendships and I keep using the word relationships, but that's what it's all about. I mean, just last week we took the young people paintballing, and there was a group of 30 of us that went paintballing, and we're all kind of covered in bruises, and it was a long and chaotic day. But it was just really, really great fun. And the really exciting thing was that there were young people that came, some from the church and some from outside of the church, many of whom didn't know each other before. And over the course of the day, they got to know each other and they made friends. And it's entirely a box ticked in terms of what I was talking about just now, of building relationships and getting to know each other. And it was just such good fun. And that's my job, really, you know. That's just one thing. But I mean, on the 4th of May, we're doing an all-night Star Wars marathon. Star Wars is my favourite film, you know, so I can't wait for that. That's the best way to spend a night, as far as I'm concerned. No, I actually, something that I think is really, really important in Christian youth work, and again, I think it's something that often gets lost because we're so focused on, you know, the fun stuff and the entertainment, the fun and games, is that, you know, a huge part of my job is my own faith, actually, and my own spirituality and my own engaging with the rhythm of the church and praying and that type of thing. And so I do have quite a lot to do with the clergy because I try to start every day with varying degrees of success, but I try to start every day with the morning Eucharist here at the cathedral. And equally, I try to finish every day with the evensong, because that gives me a grounding, that gives me something to work from. It reminds me what this is really all about. I mean, the job really, ultimately, it's about fun and entertainment, but ultimately it's about God, you know, and it's about relationship with God. And if I'm not working on that myself, then I'm not doing it. I'm not doing the job. That's, and I mean, if nothing else as well, I get on really well with the clergy here. You know, there's a great team of people working here, and I couldn't dish any dirt, not because it wouldn't be fun to, but because I genuinely have nothing negative to say about the team here. And it's just brilliant to go for a cup of coffee with them and to be enjoying a drink with just human people, you know, people who aren't too worried about being holy and good and priestly all the time, but actually are just real, genuine people whose job it is to be a priest at the same time. If someone were to land from the moon, that would be perhaps quite difficult because I'd have to start by explaining religion. But let's assume that they've already got an understanding of religion. And the way that I'd explain Chelmsford Cathedral is actually it's a really positive mixture of the old and the new, in that the worship style is quite Catholic and quite traditional and quite liturgically based and sacramentally based and that type of thing. And I think that's really important, actually, because there's a tradition there, which for young people, that's actually quite an alien thing, being a part of a tradition, because we live in a culture that's so much about, you know, instant gratification. What I want, I get it now. And so the thought of being part of a movement that's thousands of years old, I think, is almost so strange that it's attractive, you know, because it's completely alien to people, so they're interested in it. I got some Franciscan friars into a youth group a little while ago, and they talked about kind of monastic life, and the young people were blown away by it because it's so strange and so alien. And I think the cathedral does that well. There's almost a semi-monastic lifestyle here in terms of the rhythm of prayer, but it's actually also quite modern in terms of the people who are here and the humanity of the place. So young people are involved in the service. You know, there's space for young people to do things, and we have creative worship exercises for people to join in on, not traditional creative worship exercises. We have music that changed. I mean, a few weeks ago we had a girl come in and sing a piece she with a guitar, you know, kind of singer-songwriter who came in, and while people were having communion she sang. And there's room for that engaging with modern culture, which I think is really important because there's so much good stuff in modern culture, but without sacrificing the tradition, the thousands of years of liturgy and sacraments and Catholicism, I suppose. Well, I mean, one of the things I think is really important is to work in partnership, and not just with churches actually, but generally with the local community. So we have a really good working relationship with the YMCA, and I work part-time over there as well, and there's a kind of to-in and fro-in between the YMCA and the cathedral, and in a sense I feel like one scratches where the other's itching. And we also, or certainly I work quite closely with the youth worker at the Baptist church just over the road, and we run a few youth clubs together and that type of thing. And I just think one of the messages that it's important for the church to convey, not just for young people, but generally, is that we're not in competition with each other, you know, that it's not the cathedral versus Central Baptist versus the YMCA, but actually that we're all working together as part of a big picture and all doing things that the others aren't, you know, so we can signpost people to different organizations, different churches, that type of thing. And just show we're not in rivalry with each other, but we're different and doing different things, but working together, that there's a kind of harmonious way of working, I suppose. I do love tea. I'm drinking a cup of tea as we speak, which I won't because it slurps and you'll hear it in the microphone. But yeah, I do love tea. I have quite a big tea collection, and I buy loose leaf tea because I'm a snob from Whittards.